All right, so this week's video, what I'm going to be doing is kind of a continuation of my video I posted last week, which was how to create just a very basic shader. And this week we're going to be using that shader and use it within a particle system. And a lot of times particle systems and shaders do work together in order to achieve a certain effect that you want in your game. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is using our random glow shader inside of a particle system to kind of make something that looks like sparks coming off. Maybe it's sparks coming off of some electrical wire that got shorted out, or some, in my case, I'm thinking about maybe having a robot welding something. And so, of course, anytime you see welding, you always see kind of sparks flying off, or maybe two pieces of metal colliding together, kind of throw off some sparks. So what we're looking at here is we have our sphere, which we used in our basic shader, and we assign the material that we have, which in this case is this glow shader material. So if we look at it, what I have is I have it assigned to my shader, graph shader, my random glow shader, which is right down here, which I went through how to make last week. And what we're going to be doing is creating a particle system and assigning our random glow shader material to that particle that's being thrown off. The object we are going to create is an effect, and that effect is going to be a particle system. Let's kind of drag this guy out of the way here. And what we see is by default, it throws off just a default particle flying off into space. So let's kind of move it over here. I'm going to move this out of the way, just move it onto my other screen here so we can work on our particle in the scene mode. And you'll notice that I have my particle effect control down here. And I can pause it, I can play it. So I'm just going to let it play so I can watch the particles change as I change the settings over here on the right hand side. Now there's a lot of different options on particles. They can do a lot of different things. So we'll just go through them step by step here. What I want to do is I want to make more particles fly out faster, and that's this emission. So the rate over time is 10 right now. I'm going to increase it to 50. So now you'll see there's just a lot more particles coming out. I am going to come up here and I want them to be a little bit smaller. So you'll see this start size, start speed, start delay. Start size is 1. Let's make it 0.2. Let's make it a lot smaller, maybe 0.3. We'll see once we change some of the other values whether that's too big or too small. What I also want is I don't want them just flying up. I want them to kind of fly out and then fall down. So what we can do is we can go to this gravity modifier, and I'm going to change it to 1. That kind of adds gravity onto it. Now, if they're kind of falling a little fast, maybe they're not flying up as high as we want, we can change the start speed. Maybe that's a little bit too much. It's a lot of trial and error, and you can play around to get kind of the effect you want. Now, they're falling way below kind of the plane here where they started out. And so what I can do is I can decrease, the duration is going to be if it's not looping. The start lifetime, if I change that to 1, now this is in seconds, so they'll only stay alive for 1 second. So that's looking better. So now what we want to do is we want them all to start from this one point here. If we kind of pause it here, they're kind of not coming out all at the same point, and we want them all to come out of the same point. So we can go to this shape Right now the default shape is cone, which is good. That's what we want. But the radius is a little small, or big actually, at the bottom. You'll see this is the radius of the, it's really random where they will come out of. And I want to be all the way down to a point. And I could adjust one of these. I think it's maybe radius thickness. Nope, that's not it. The easiest thing to do is to come down here and you click on this little icon here, and it gives us these little handles. You'll see that's changing the radius all the way down almost to 0. And then what we can do is if we bring this down, it can make our spread a little different. Let's spread that out. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Now the default is these particles, and they default to a default material, and we're going to change that material. Let's close that down. It's going to be under this renderer here. So we'll come down under renderer, and by default, if we go to the material, it's defaulting to this particle lit. And one thing to note is that when it's that default material, we can change the colors, the color over lifetime, lots of things. And I don't want to change any of those. What I want is a glowing material, our shader glow material. So I can click on that and I can just drag it down there. And there now it's going to assign our glow material. Now one thing you'll notice is that, and we can't tell kind of the spheres being covered up, but all of the particles are going to glow together. And that's one thing to note with a shader material, is that the material, anything that's assigned to that material will act exactly the same. That's just how materials work. We can't like affect one particle differently than the other. That's just not an option. But that's fine. But you'll notice that our particles are square, and we don't want them square. What I want them to be, and there's lots of ways to affect this. In my other video, Why Doesn't My Stuff Glow, I assign a mask to it and I make it spin and do lots of other things. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under this render mode and I'm going to change it to mesh. And I'm going to change the mesh to a sphere. There we go. So now what you'll see is I have my particles are little spheres, but now see kind of how they're too big. Before the particles, they look fine. Now they're like way too big. So I'm going to change that start size to 0.1. Okay, it's looking a little better. But what I really need is my sparks should have glowing streaks behind them, and I can change that by adding a trail. All right, so we got our trails, and it defaults to no material. Now you'll notice as soon as I added a trail, I got this additional selection down here, this trail material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign that also to my glow shader. I could make a different shader if I wanted my material to act differently. That's an option. Again, lots of options. You can mix and match whatever you want in order to get whatever effect you want. In this case, I am going to use that same glow material. Now my trails are way too wide, so I'm going to come up here. I'm going to change that. Not the lifetime is fine. Going to change the width over trail, and I'm going to change it to curve. I'm going to grab this curve and I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to drag this down a little bit to make them wider or narrower over the lifetime, and maybe change the lifetime. Maybe it's a little too long. Let's try 0.2. Let's try 0.3, 0.4. Nope. Yeah, that's not bad. Now I'm looking at it in the scene here, and they're selected, so it's kind of hard to tell. But if I drag this guy over here instead, look at my particle system. Hit play. Looks like my camera is way off for my particles. Let's drag him over where I can see it better. A little high. So I'm kind of close to it, so it's a little harder to see. And that's the other thing is some of these things, well, it obviously depends on how close you are to the camera. All right, so again, we could play with the intensity. Maybe the intensity is a little bright, or maybe the trail's a little too wide. Let's go over here, maybe change our trail, width of the trail. Maybe bring that all the way, that is 0. That's looking a little better. So now what we're gonna do is, so that was just to kind of get the look, but when they're all coming out all at once, and maybe that's too many, maybe that's too few. Again, you can play around with it to get kind of the effect you want. I don't really want it looping, so I'm going to unselect that. I'm going to change this 5 to maybe 0.2. So now every time I play, see, I only get a few. So it looks a lot different because it stops sending them out. So the ones that are out get a little better, kind of get a little better look. They kind of fade away. You'll notice that they kind of come out at random points. Which is kind of what you expect with sparks flying out. And now the number, of course, isn't overwhelming. So now the last thing I'm going to do is, certainly if it's part of a game, you're going to want to trigger these sparks. So I'll stop that. I'm going to go to my particle system, come over here, and the particle system is an object. And so let's collapse that. We can add a component to it. And I've created a basic script. It's very basic. I'll show it to you in a minute. But I call it play sparks. And let's go, and I'll drag my guy over here. So basically, it's pretty straightforward. All I do is on the update, I am going to get a key code, and anytime I hit the space bar, I am going to grab the particle system. So again, the particle system is just a component. You can interact it with code. And just like I was hitting that play button in the editor, I can actually execute a play within my code. So now that that's assigned to play sparks, now we're going to hit play. I'm going to hit the space bar. Whoops. You know what? I did all that adjustment while I was in play mode, and it's one thing to remember that in Unity, anything you change in play mode will be undone or not saved once you exit play mode. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit play mode here. I will move that guy here, move him here. I think he was a little high. Yep. Let's move him down like that. We still don't see him. Where is it? Okay. Needs to be kind of back there and down a little bit more. Almost kind of right on top. Oh, let's see. Okay. So I'll move him here. Kind of a pain why you can't. I'm not sure. I never looked into how to save that while you're in play mode. All right. Now remember that we had changed our lifetime. Let's change that looping back, change this to 0.2. Component's still there. All right, so now let's hit play. Still a little close to the camera. It's still a little high. Maybe a little big for sparks. Again, a lot of this takes a lot of tweaking, but you get the idea. You can play around with all of these values in order to get the effect you want. Maybe you want to increase the gravity, change the spread, change the number, change the lifetime, change the width of the trail. Even we could tweak the intensity of the glow. Lots of different options. So as you can see, we can combine the particle system with our simple shader in order to get a certain effect. So my next video is I'm going to be digging more into shaders and look at some of the other options. This was a pretty simple one, but I'll kind of go through it pretty step by step. I know there's a lot of videos on some really complicated shaders and some really cool stuff, but they can get complicated pretty fast. And it's one thing to follow along with someone else's steps. It's the other thing to understand what all those steps are doing so you can create your own shaders from scratch, because that's the whole point. You could just buy a package of shaders, but hopefully the reason you're watching these videos is you want to understand how to do it yourself, because for me, that's the fun of making a game, right? I did, and I put these together myself, and that's part of the creativity. And I don't know, I think it's pretty fun to play around with the particle systems. I've spent hours just messing with it and seeing what happens, and it's just cool to make cool looking special effects. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't. I have a lot of other very basic videos on going over other things. And again, if you don't understand what this is, I will put that link to Why Doesn't My Stuff Glow, which we'll go over to make sure that you can get all the effects showing up the way they should be. And stay tuned for my next video. Thanks for watching.